Hi and welcome back to the channel. I'm Steven. Today with a camera review. We are looking at the Nikon ZFC over here. This camera came out like 3 years ago. Was it 2 or 3 years ago? Quite a while ago. But this was pretty popular from what I heard when it first came out, especially in Asian countries, because people here, they love pretty cameras in general. Not to mention, retro seems to be quite the trend nowadays with how well Fujifilm is doing with their cameras. Now, why did I buy the Nikon ZFC in the first place? The reason being, I was actually kind of interested in the full-frame Nikon Zf, which isn't a cheap camera, but at the same time, I wasn't sure whether I will like these retro dials and controls, whether I will get used to it. That is a very important part of today's video when I discuss about my experiences with this camera. So, what if I did not like the controls, but I dropped $2,000 or $1,800 on a ZF? That would be a big buyer's remorse over there. Getting a ZFC makes more sense in my case over here, and I don't mind this being an older autofocus system, no X-Speed 7 over here. I don't care about that when it comes to street photography, not a very demanding kind of photography, given that most of the time we do zone focusing, which means we will focus on a very specific area in the photograph, and then we'll lock our focus and wait for a subject to move into that specific part, and then you click the shutter button. That is zone focusing, a method I use a lot actually. So you don't need the most advanced IAF for street photography. It does help you, but not necessary. The second reason why I picked up a pre-owned ZFC was because I want a photography-focused camera. After I replaced my Nikon Z30 with a Canon R8, the one filming me right now for video users, R8 does not overheat in 4K 30. Z30 does overheat, ZFC does overheat. So now that I have a camera taking over my video work, I want something that is photography-centric and not too expensive. ZFC was ideal. Not to mention, it looks pretty, right? The looks is a main part of it, though I still have a bit of complaints about the looks later. Meanwhile, the third reason being, ZFC does not look like a professional camera, and that is important. It looks like something a tourist will have around their neck, and that can be very important, this perception over here, where when you visit certain places out there, especially private properties, anything that you can think of that requires a permit for you to do photography over there, they don't care whether you are a hobbyist or a professional. If they see you having an expensive, professional-looking camera around your neck, they will ask you, where is your permit? If you don't have a permit, you cannot photograph here. And that is when a camera like this comes in, where people will not take you seriously. Meanwhile, you will secretly swap out the kit lens with a f1.2, and then you laugh at the person who didn't know this is actually sort of professional, if you know how to use it. Moving on to the ergonomics and design of this camera. I can already hear people complaining that they couldn't hold this camera even though I'm sitting alone in this room. If you choose to buy a retro camera, it means that you want something that looks like an old film camera from 30, 40, 50 years ago, and those were not ergonomic cameras to begin with. You are already aware of that very fact, and after you buy it, you complain that it is not nice to hold. Like, isn't it obvious in the first place? That is the whole point of this kind of design, right? To follow the old cameras of the past. If you don't like it, buy something that is a bit like a DSLR in terms of the design and the grip layout. Though yes, it remains a fact that this is not an easy camera to hold. It can feel slippery and you'll want to buy a grip for it. Be it a small rig or some other Chinese brands, you don't have to spend for a small rig grip, you know. Can buy a JJC grip for like $30. Yeah, less than $30 in fact. This is a JJC grip, by the way. Speaking of the fake leather surface over here, I don't like the feel of it, but at the same time, on my copy of this ZFC, you can see the leather has a little bit of wear and tear over here because, you know, the camera was hard to hold. So you hold it a little bit tighter sometimes, and then you end up scratching the leather with your fingernails. So that is one of the sad parts. I think I should be buying some kind of stickers or wrap up this camera in a different color. That is also an option. The next thing about the build of this camera is this plastic top and the silver paint on it. Yes, it matters. After buying the ZFC, and using it for a couple of months, I swear not to buy a silver camera again. Even though I like the looks of it. Like if I were to buy a Fujifilm X-M5 today, I'll go for the all black model, not the silver top model. Because the silver paint is obviously painted, which means it is very prone to scratches. There was once where I wanted quick access to my camera over here, so I threw this camera into my waist pouch, my fanny pack, and this camera was banging against other accessories I have in my pouch, such as a mini tripod, and it ended up scratching a silver paint on this camera. I was a little bit pissed when I saw it, like, oh, these scratches weren't there before, but can't be helped, I suppose. I made a mistake, I admit that, but painted cameras are just way too easy to scratch, and I'm not sure if I will buy a silver camera anymore. So relating to the paintwork and the silver plastic top over here, another problem was these two, what do you call this? These metal rings on the side of the camera, which allows you to put your own strap on, obviously. This is bad design. Yeah, this metal thing over here. So you see, when you are hanging your camera straps on these two metal pins over here, and you have it around your waist like this, and then you walk around, so the camera is like, you get the point, right? It is swinging around, and what happens is that these metal rings over here are scratching the sides of the camera. And by now, you see on both sides of this camera, you can see paint being scratched off the surface. It looks terrible. It was already there when my friend sold this camera to me. I thought it was normal wear and tear because it is a pre-owned camera to begin with. And then after using it for a couple of months, this paint scratch got even worse. And that was when I realized these metal rings are actually the source of the problem. I stopped using a neck strap, and now I use a wrist strap from Peak Design, and then I tie it to this grip over here at one corner. This is a better solution around my wrist like that, you know. Yes, this camera does feel plasticky, it does feel cheap, but on the internet, there are two different kinds of people. The first kind are the ones who want their camera to feel premium and high quality, all metal built, and they don't care about the weight that comes with it. And then there is the second kind of people who wants their camera to be as light as possible, that they don't care if the whole camera feels like a plastic toy. I have heard so many people complain about the weight of the ZF, so there you go, ZFC. But instead, when I look at reviews of Nikon ZFC on other videos or other websites, people will be complaining about the plastic build over here. Do you want your camera to feel premium with metal build, or do you want it to be as light as possible? You can only choose one. Now, speaking of the dials on top over here, I actually like the tactile sensation of turning the dials and slowing down, taking my time to capture images instead of, having everything on automatic. Like, yeah, you're being deliberate when you are choosing your settings and framing your shots with a viewfinder. But at the same time, I have mixed feelings about these dials on top. And no, I am not talking about how weird the ISO modes are. Like, if the camera is in automatic, then the ISO dial appears to be useless. No, that is not my problem. Because to me, I am a long-time Nikon user for the past 10 years. I know how Nikon systems work. So, when the cameras are in auto and you are on auto ISO, so what does the ISO dial does, right? Obviously, it indicates the minimum ISO you'll be using. For me, it is obvious, but apparently a lot of people couldn't figure it out. Yes, so the dial over here, it actually has a function even though you are on auto ISO mode. Meanwhile, the shutter speed dial over here, I don't like it, but at the same time, I understand why it is designed this way, because we are in full stop increments, 1/4, 1/8, 1/15, 1/30, 1/60, full stop increments. I'm not sure if I like that. Meanwhile, the ISO dial actually has a 1/3 increment. Between 100 and 200, I have two dots over there, that is 125 and 160. And I don't like it because of my own photography style. I guess this is subjective because with the way I use my cameras, I jump a full stop with ISO. If 100 is not enough, I go straight to 200 to 400 and so on. And then I will be more specific with my shutter speed selection down to 1/3 of a stop. That is the way I do my photography. But the dials on the ZFC is the exact opposite. That is just me, and me being very technical at times. Though I am willing to compromise, like if you are photographing out there on the streets, you're doing street photography, I think capturing the moment is more important. The next complaint I have about the ZFC is the shutter button over here. It feels like a 3-stage button rather than 2 stages, focus and capture. This feels like wake up, focus, capture. There has been occasions where I saw something interesting, I wanted to quickly capture it, and then I press the shutter button, but the camera does not wake up, and by the time I managed to get it to wake up, the moment is gone. That was incredibly irritating, and it has happened to me so many times. Nowadays, 2 or 3 months later after owning this camera, it has happened a little bit less because I have gotten used to it even more by now. But I'm not sure if film cameras from 30 or 40 years ago are exactly like that, so I can't get used to it. And the last problem I have with the ZFC's buttons over here, yes, the D-pad and the buttons over here, it feels kind of mushy, All I can say is that the Nikon Z30's buttons are a lot nicer to press. It feels more reassuring. You get a very nice click over there. Meanwhile, the ZFC's rear buttons, sometimes I don't feel a proper click over there. So having used this camera for over 2 months by now, I would say the shooting experience overall is mixed. But the mechanical experience on this camera is just outstanding. There is something really satisfying with each click, with each photograph you get whenever you click the shutter button. I mean, listen to this. The mechanical shutter sound of the Canon R8, a way more expensive camera, it sounds terrible. It is not a full mechanical shutter, so it sounds horrible. Meanwhile, each shot you take with this ZFC, it feels very satisfying. And that adds to the experience of using a camera like this. I can't even say the same thing about the Nikon Z8. It feels too digital, too electronic. It does not feel as satisfying as even a ZFC, not to mention maybe a ZF. So that is my experience so far with using the ZFC for photography. Now moving on to other parts of this camera which may be relevant, a quick mention. A fully flip out screen, great for vlogging, though does not have any 10-bit video. And there is a 30-minute recording limit, unfortunately, which is why I owned a Nikon Z30 in the first place, because I need to do very long videos for my other YouTube channel. This one, since I bought this for photography only, I am able to forgive the 30-minute video limit. On the side of the camera, we have is that micro HDMI? I'm not too sure. And then we have a USB Type-C and a microphone port, no headphone jack. Some people want a headphone jack. I don't need it, I don't care, but some people will want it. Thankfully, this camera does charge via USB Type-C, which the Z50 does not. So that is all for the external controls and features of this camera. We do have one function button in front over here, very important to me as well. Now moving on to image quality. Know what? What is there to discuss? This thing is exactly the same as the Nikon Z30, the same exact sensor, 20.9 megapixel APS-C sensor, which was used in the Nikon D500 for the first time. That was way back in year 2016. It is quite an old sensor by now, but old does not mean incompetent, because this is quite a decent sensor by APS-C standards for low light photography. High ISO performance is competent. I wouldn't say best in class, very competent, and I would be happy to shoot this in ISO 1600 or maximum 3200. That's the maximum, because I'm such a technical guy that I couldn't stand bad image quality. In general, I won't go beyond 1600 ISO on APS-C cameras regardless of which model I'm using. But with this camera, I'm willing to compromise up to 3200 because the high ISO performance on this sensor is a little bit above average. Yeah, it is not bad at all to say. This is not a serious camera to me, it is just a documentation camera and occasional street photo for uploading on social media. 21 megapixels is more than enough for me. Moving on to video specs, you're looking at 4K 30 uncropped maximum. Full HD is up to 120 frames per second. To me, the video specs are competent as long you are fine with not having 10-bit video, which is more flexible in editing later if you want to adjust the colors or slap on all those custom LUTs. Meanwhile, I haven't used this camera for video much, like 95% for photography, but I would say the performance is going to be very similar to the Z30. The Z30 is probably better because it does not have a 30-minute recording limit, and given that both have the same sensor, the video quality is going to be pretty much identical, I would say, and I was pretty happy with the Z30 video footage, be it 4K 30 or Full HD. Speaking of autofocus performance, well, you're looking at an older generation system over here, X-Speed 6. The tracking autofocus on this camera is not going to be very good on anything that is moving very fast. But at the same time, look at the design of this camera. Does this look like something you put a 600mm lens on and go on a safari? No, right? So for a camera like this, I think I can forgive the weaker AF compared to the newer models out there in the market. Can I recommend it? Now, this is difficult. Like, if you want a very pretty camera, you want something retro looking, and you want it to have a viewfinder, then yes, ZFC is worth looking at, because the newer Fujifilm X-M5 does not have a viewfinder, and then there is Olympus EM10 Mark IV, which is micro four thirds at around $800. That is an old camera, and it has only a contrast detect AF system, which is inferior to ZFC. ZFC is still better. So I think ZFC is still worth considering for someone who wants a retro camera with a viewfinder and under $1,000 US. That is the way I see it. Your only other option, Fujifilm X-T32. That is not a good camera for for autofocusing as well. Yeah. Probably even behind the ZFC, I would say. And the video AF on that is borderline, I don't want to go into details, but not good, right? So when you look at it this way, ZFC is still pretty compelling, though there will be people saying that I would rather buy Fujifilm because they have a larger selection of lenses, which is a valid argument. For me, I don't see Nikon APS-C, Nikon DX as lacking in lenses unless you are specifically looking for zoom lenses that has bright aperture f2.8 or brighter. Then yes, Nikon ZDX does not have any. Like the Sigma 18-50 2.8, Nikon does not have anything like that. Or an ultra-wide zoom lens, a 10-20, 10-18 2.8. Yes, Nikon does not have anything like that. But outside of these two specific kinds of zoom lenses, I would say there are a lot of lens choices for Nikon DX in the third party Chinese lenses, right? We have Viltrox with their f1.2 Pro lenses, or the cheaper 1.4 and 1.7 lenses that cost $200 to $400. There are so many low budget, excellent prime lenses by Chinese brands which is available for Nikon Z. 13mm all the way up to 75, 85mm. So if anyone comes and tell me Nikon ZDX does not have lenses at all, bullshit. Yeah, that is all I have to say. Of course, if autofocus performance is very important to you, save up a little bit more, buy the Z50 Mark II. You will be very happy with that camera. This is mainly for people who want a camera with this kind of design. I would say that I will be keeping it at least for the next few months unless I win the lottery or something and I can afford something more expensive. Yes, I will be keeping it because this camera still serves a very single important purpose in my current gear lineup. This is the camera that lets me walk into places where there are security guards walking around asking where is your permit. So that is the review for today on Nikon ZFC. What do you think? Do you own one? Are you interested in getting one? Let me know in the comments below, and I hope that this review is helpful to those of you interested in this camera. Many plus and minuses. And until then, if you found this review to be helpful or informative, give this video a like, subscribe to this channel, help this small channel grow. Thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you guys again very soon. Goodbye.